At exactly 1 a.m. on September 13, 2025, two massive oil tankers sat at Primorsk port on Russia's Baltic coast. Their cargo holds nearly full with crude oil worth over $200 million. The pumps were still running, but unbeknownst to the crews or anyone else in Russia, 3 hours earlier, more than 40 armed drones had lifted off from Ukraine, each one carrying enough explosives to tear through steel. They were flying low, staying invisible, and heading straight for those ships. What happened next would shock the Kremlin and send oil markets into chaos. This is the story of how a $4 million drone swarm crippled one of Russia's most protected oil facilities in under 2 minutes. Primorsk oil port represents more than just another dot on Russia's coastline. This facility serves as Moscow's largest energy export gateway on the Baltic Sea, pumping crude oil into tankers that keep Russia's economy breathing and its war machine running. On the night of September 13, 2025, two giant tankers named Kusto and Kyiv were docked at the port's main piers, connected to enormous steel pipelines that pumped hundreds of thousands of liters of crude oil directly into their cargo holds. The industrial lights illuminated what looked like a routine fueling operation, but Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking these ships for days. Each vessel had a capacity exceeding 120,000 short tons, translating to millions of barrels of crude oil. These weren't just ships, they were floating treasuries carrying the lifeblood of Russia's export economy. Energy contracts with Europe and China depended on vessels like these making their scheduled deliveries. Ukraine understood something critical. An empty tanker is just metal. A fully loaded tanker is a strategic target worth destroying. A single load from these tankers sustained Russia's strategic export flow for multiple days. The crude oil being pumped that night had a market value exceeding $200 million. So, destroying these ships while fully loaded would create a cascading disaster. The loss of the vessels themselves, the destruction of port infrastructure from resulting fires, the interruption of loading operations for weeks, and the message it would send to insurance companies and shipping partners still doing business with Russia. Military planners identified Primorsk as the single most valuable target in Russia's entire energy export chain. The port handles a massive percentage of Russia's Baltic crude oil exports, and unlike inland refineries or pipelines that can reroute, a port destruction creates bottlenecks that cannot be easily solved. Every tanker sitting idle because Primorsk is offline means lost revenue, broken contracts, and strategic pressure on Russia's ability to fund its military operations. So, Ukraine had patience. They watched the fueling operation begin at 1 a.m. and tracked the flow rate. Intelligence analysts calculated exactly when the ships would reach maximum capacity, when the crude oil would fill the holds to the point where any breach would trigger catastrophic secondary explosions. But waiting for the perfect moment was only part of Ukraine's plan. Getting 40 explosive-laden drones across 600 miles of heavily defended Russian airspace without being detected required technology that shouldn't exist yet. At exactly 1:15 a.m., from a covert launch site in northern Ukraine, the first Lyuty AN-196 UAV screamed into the darkness. Every 10 seconds after that, another drone launched. Within 7 minutes, the entire formation of over 40 UAVs had left their rails and begun the most sophisticated drone operation ever attempted. These weren't simple remote-controlled aircraft. Each Lyuty carried nearly 65 pounds of PBX-12, a thermoplastic polymer explosive variant designed for superior penetration against hardened targets. The swarm immediately split into 3 separate formations, and this division wasn't random. The center axis, composed of 20 UAVs, hugged the rail corridor through Belgorod and Voronezh, flying under 656 feet to stay entirely invisible for ground-based radar systems. The east axis, with 10 UAVs, routed through Tambov and Ryazan, deliberately skirting around known positions of S-400 and Panzer S-1 air defense batteries around Tula. The west axis, another 10 UAVs, followed the Belarus border, using terrain masking and dense forests to evade the long-range Podzolnok and Nebo-M radar systems. What made these drones genuinely terrifying was the Sky-Node-S platform controlling them. This low-level artificial intelligence system integrated computer vision, high-resolution infrared cameras, and real-time digitized terrain maps to navigate without any human input. Even if Russia jammed GPS signals, which they did repeatedly, the Skynode automatically switched to inertial navigation combined with visual mapping. The AI matched live camera feeds against preloaded digital maps, using power lines, transmission towers, forest contours, and drainage channels as navigation landmarks in complete radio silence. For nearly 3 hours, 40 drones flew across heavily defended Russian territory, maintaining altitudes below 330 feet and spacing themselves between 650 and 980 feet apart. This spacing prevented multiple drones from being destroyed by a single missile hit while maintaining swarm cohesion through the Skynode S platform. Flying undetected for 600 miles was impressive, but Ukraine knew that as the drones approached their target, Russia's coastal defenses would eventually spot them. The solution was a deception so clever it turned Russia's own air defense success into a catastrophic failure. At 3:41 a.m., as the UAV swarm closed within 140 miles of the Leningrad border, Ukraine activated the trump card they'd been hiding since the operation began. From a control center near Kharkiv, operators steered a Ukrainian low-Earth orbit reconnaissance satellite into position. This wasn't a standard surveillance satellite. Ukrainian engineers had modified it to carry a false reflection module specifically designed to jam radar systems. For the next 7 minutes, this satellite created an electronic ghost storm across Russia's critical early warning belt along the Smolensk-Tver-Novgorod line. This radar chain serves as northwest Russia's primary defense against threats from Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. The satellite bombarded Russian Podsolnik, Gamma-DE, and Nebo-M radars with dozens of false returns, creating the appearance of a massive electronic cloud moving parallel toward the northwest. On Russian radar screens, operators suddenly saw their displays flooded with red blips indicating incoming threats. While Russian Air Defense Command scrambled to process this avalanche of false targets, 40 real Lyuty UAVs continued their silent approach at low altitude, completely hidden beneath the chaos. The electronic warfare technique was brilliant because it exploited a fundamental weakness in modern air defense. Operators must make split-second decisions about which threats are real. Flood the system with false data, and the real threat becomes invisible. At 4 a.m., after nearly 3 hours of terrain-hugging flight, the UAV formation reached the Gulf of Finland approaches, less than 95 miles from Primorsk. Then Ukraine executed the second phase of their deception. 5 UAVs from the center axis suddenly broke formation and climbed rapidly to 16,400 feet, deliberately making themselves visible to Russian radar. Each of these 5 drones carried radar reflective panels and signal emulation transmitters that made them appear much larger than they actually were. On radar screens at the Lezhnevo early warning station in Novgorod region, these 5 targets appeared as clear, stable returns with strong reflectivity. Russian operators immediately classified them as reconnaissance UAVs or small aircraft and raised the alert level. Within 2 minutes, Air Defense Command issued firing orders. 2 Pantsir S-1 batteries in Yaroslavl launched 4 missiles. From Cherepovets, an S-400 battery fired 2 48N-6E missiles capable of reaching Mach 6. 40 seconds later, all 5 decoy UAVs vanished from radar screens. Thermal sensors recorded multiple fragments falling into forests north of Novgorod. Russian command announced the successful neutralization of 5 high-altitude intruding targets. Officers congratulated each other on the quick response. They had no idea they'd just wasted missiles worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each on decoys that Ukraine had built for somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 apiece. Having just won an engagement, Russian defenders assumed the threat had been neutralized. Meanwhile, the real attack force was entering its final approach. The 35 surviving drones had crossed 600 miles of Russian territory undetected, but now came the hardest part, penetrating the concentrated coastal defenses surrounding Primorsk and delivering precision strikes against specific targets in total darkness. At 4:27 a.m., Russian ground radar finally began registering real contacts. There were numerous small targets hugging the surface, converging from 3 different directions. At the Air Defense Command near Vyborg, the duty lieutenant colonel ordered engagement, but the time for effective response had already passed. And within 45 seconds, Baltic air defense controllers confirmed their worst nightmare. The entire UAV formation was heading straight for Primorsk port, Russia's second-largest oil export hub. 6 Pantsir S-1 batteries immediately opened fire from coastal positions. Launch tubes rose and simultaneously released 57 million 6 missiles that roared through the night sky. The three UAV formations, center, east, and west, converged simultaneously from all directions, creating a timed encirclement coordinated down to the second. The remaining 35 drones split into smaller groups, each maintaining altitude under 200 feet while weaving between container yards, coastal rail lines, and petrochemical complexes. Over the next 90 seconds, Russian air defenses destroyed 25 UAVs. The Panzer S-1 systems shredded some with 30mm autocannons as they closed under 656 feet. Others were intercepted by missiles at close range. But the final 10 UAVs were different. These were the Alpha Wolves, each assigned independent targets, unique flight algorithms, and heavier payloads reserved for delivering killing blows. At 4:44 a.m., they simultaneously activated terminal attack mode. The first two Alpha Wolves dove at the port's operations center, the facility that controlled all loading schedules, fueling processes, and satellite routing for the entire port complex. One UAV pulled a sharp climb from the left before plunging nose first through a second-floor window, identified by its infrared signature as housing the main server cluster. The explosion severed Primorsk's coordination brain. Simultaneously, two other UAVs struck the tanker Kusto moored at the southern pier. The first slammed into the engine room, destroying the power station and instantly halting the oil pumps mid-flow. The second approached from starboard and rammed the main intake pipe. The impact triggered a secondary explosion as pressurized crude oil ignited. Unfinished crude spilled across the pier and ignited within 6 seconds, creating a rapidly spreading fire that turned the loading area into an inferno. In just 120 seconds, the drones had systematically destroyed Primorsk's ability to function. And as dawn broke over the Baltic Sea, satellite imagery showed Primorsk as a blazing scar stretching more than 1 mile long, with 2 core infernos and 4 secondary fires burning out of control. Russia later confirmed that at least 2 tankers were destroyed. The main loading line to offshore vessels was completely halted. Internal power grids sustained severe damage, and fuel exports through Primorsk were disrupted for an extended period. Under the shock of the strike, all remaining tankers in the Primorsk Gulf received immediate orders to withdraw, triggering cascading logistical delays throughout Russia's Baltic export network. Modern warfare no longer requires expensive fighter jets, cruise missiles, or massive military budgets. A relatively small number of sophisticated drones operated with tactical intelligence and technological innovation can achieve strategic effects previously possible only through conventional air campaigns. The Primorsk strike proved that geography no longer provides security, that expensive defense systems can be systematically defeated, and that critical infrastructure anywhere within drone range has become a legitimate target. So, what do you think about this evolution in warfare? Do you think Russia has the capability to sustain such future strikes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown valuable, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more such deep dives. Until next time, stay informed.